It's a blessing to welcome on one of the more accomplished high school coaches we've had. He's USA basketball now, undefeated, 10 straight championships. Coach Don Showalter, how you doing, Coach?
Good. Glad to be on, and I hope everybody's doing well.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we were just kind of talking about it, but we know it's COVID shut down USA basketball for practically the past year now. You're starting to look to get back into that. Just take us through how excited you are and what it's like to kind of get back into the groove.
Yeah, our office has actually been closed, and events have been canceled since last March.
Mm-hmm.
When we found out the NCAA was canceling their March Madness and everything else there. So we've been doing a lot of projects that we put on the back burner that we haven't had time to get to. So that's been kind of a nice thing too. We just came back from Puerto Rico here this past week. We had the FIBA Americas qualifying tournament there, which is mostly G League guys. We had two guys that had played in the NBA. They're no longer in it. Joe Jackson and Isaiah Thomas both played in it. So that's good. We won both games, beat Mexico, and we beat Puerto Rico. So that's really our first kind of event out, and that's a FIBA event. So you really have no choice but to at least make an attempt to go to those. So yeah, we're starting up with some academies, coaches academies. We're starting up with some. FIBA has our U16 tournament scheduled for first part of June, so we'll have a training camp the end of May. So things are kind of wrapping up a little bit, and we're excited about that. When you're used to going and doing events and being on the road and watching kids play, and not do that for a year, why you have to kind of adjust to the fact that you're not really doing that. Now we're ready to go at it.
That's what I was going to ask you. You've been coaching now for a long time. You've had the kind of basketball schedule. We know it's always hectic, busy through high school. Then you go into USA and all this. How's it been though for that 6 to 8 month span where you just kind of were sitting at home relaxing? How kind of was that? Just kind of getting used to not being on a constant go in the basketball world.
Yeah, well, normally I'd be going out watching high school games and tournaments, to evaluate players for this year. It'd be our U16, so it'd be mostly young kids, freshmen, some sophomores, and then also our U19s, which is basically our high school seniors. So we didn't get a chance to see a lot of those kids this past year. We saw them when they were younger. So that really, it's just like college coaches going out on the road. They don't have a chance to really recruit and see the players, and we didn't have a chance to really evaluate as much as we would have liked before these tournaments come up this coming summer. But hopefully maybe this spring we can get out and see some of those young kids as well. So, because that's really a major part of how we decide what kids to invite and those kind of things for our training camps. So that's been something that we missed this past year. But on the right side of it, I didn't know what Zoom was last March, and now I probably do a Zoom call or Zoom meeting every day. Our Zoom clinic, I give a lot of clinics both internationally and in the States via Zoom. So that's been really good. So we kind of adjust, and I think coaches continue to learn in however aspect they can, whether it be by Zoom, whether it be in person. So that's been really a plus. And then we've had some projects like our e-learning programs that we've been working on getting out to coaches as well.
We're going to get into today. We're going to get into USA basketball a little bit, but I kind of want to go through your whole story. It's been a long journey. Take us through this, though. I mean, you're obviously from Iowa. Take us through just kind of growing up, and was basketball as a priority for you? Were you always wanting to be a coach, or kind of take us through how you originally got into this whole coaching world?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that question a lot, but I think from early on, I first of all, I love the game of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And that was due to some coaches I had in sixth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade. And so I tell coaches today that, your main job with youth players is to have them love the game. Because once they love the game, they're going to pursue it. They're going to get better. They're going to continue to learn. So that's what happened to me. I just love the game of basketball. And I used to scoop snow off the driveway, and I grew up on a farm, so we had rims and baskets and in every barn that we had. So I really, and I had four brothers that were kind of close to the same age. So we always had some good basketball games as well. So growing up was really, I loved all sports. Baseball, I really loved as well, football, but basketball was my passion. And so as I just got older and played high school basketball, very fortunate to have a really, really good high school basketball coach. We made our state tournament several times. So I think all those things really go into how much you put forth in the game. And then I played college basketball at NAIA school.
Mm-hmm.
I loved that small atmosphere. I was never good enough to be a Division I player, but I was pretty good. I was good enough to play college basketball. And a lot of kids today don't understand that playing NAIA or Division III or Division II is really a good brand of basketball. And so I encourage a lot of players, hey, look at those where you get a chance to play as opposed to sitting on a bench maybe at D1 school. So after college, I coached at a small high school in Iowa, and it was a great experience. Obviously, when we come right out of college, most of us think that we can do change the world right away, and I found out that I wasn't going to change the basketball in that school right away, but we certainly accomplished a lot of things. When I took over the position, the first job I had, it was a small school, and I think they were 0-36 before I took the job. So it was really a good situation because the only way you could go is up. And then from there, I went to a different high school that had a great basketball tradition. So it was really two different levels of basketball. One, I'm trying to really build a program, and the second one, I'm trying to sustain a program. And that was a good thing. You approach things a little different when you try to sustain a program as to when you try to build it. And then the third high school I was at was my alma mater, and I went back there. I said I'd never do that, but it was a good situation, great basketball program for years before I got there, obviously, and I was there for a good number of years. We had great programs, won the state tournament many times, and just had a fun time there. And it was good to raise our kids in an environment around grandpas and grandmas, and they could come and see and watch them play as well. And then my last stop was at a very one of the biggest high schools in the state of Iowa, in Iowa City, close to where I grew up as well. But that was a very diverse school, great situation, not a real good basketball program, but again, it's kind of reverted back to the first job I took where we really had to work to build a culture. And I love the kids, and it was great situation. So that's kind of the four different places I was at. And then during that time, I also did a lot of stuff with USA Basketball while I was coaching and teaching, because during the summertime, then I would do some coaching with USA Basketball. So I coached starting in 2009. I coached the U6 junior national teams, which is our U16 and U17, and I was very fortunate to coach some really good players. Our first team had Brad Beal, who just made the starting lineup for the All-Star game. Andre Drummond, Michael Gilchrist, Quinn Cook was our first team. So that was really a great situation. And then continued to coach the junior national team. We went to our tournaments were usually Europe, Argentina, South America. So Dubai, we played in Dubai for one of our tournaments. So really a great situation there. We had guys like Jayson Tatum, who's an all-star now, was on one of our teams. Colin Sexton, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and just a really good, different array of really elite players, and very fortunate to coach them. And then my first experience with USA Basketball was actually in 1998, where I coached the Hoop Summit. That's where we put together our top seniors against international U19 players. And on that team was a floppy-haired German by the name of Dirk Nowitzki, who we played against. And really, at that time, nobody really knew about Dirk. He was kind of under the radar, and he was a young kid, and he came over to and played for the international team against us. And we did a great job on him. We held him to like 38 points and 25 rebounds. So that was his coming out party. And then, of course, he got drafted, and the rest is history. But that was my first indoctrination to coaching with USA basketball. And then after that, I coached in the McDonald's All-American game, Jordan Brand Classic, Capital Classic, a lot of All-Star games, and been on some committees. And then in 2016, I started full-time with USA basketball, and I still coach some of the junior national teams. So I've been working full-time with USA basketball after retiring from coaching in Iowa. And that's been really a fun aspect. Obviously, USA basketball is the highest basketball organization in the world, and to work for USA basketball is really, for me, has been just unbelievable.
And we're going to get into each one of those stops in a little bit, but just when you step back and you look at the first head coaching job you got, would you ever imagine you becoming a USA basketball coach, coaching 50-plus NBA players, coaching the McDonald's game, Jordan Brand Classic, all these things you just talked about? Would you ever imagine that?
No, and I think I always tell coaches, I say, it's really hard to plot out your destination in front of you. I mean, I always say you never connect the dots ahead of you. You connect the dots behind you. What got you there? What did you do that allowed me to coach in the Hoop Summit, the McDonald's game, and those kind of things. So I think a lot of it for me was, I really was a basketball junkie. I mean, I wanted to go to clinics. I wanted to work basketball camps. And so when I work basketball camps, you meet a lot of people. And I think that's what coaches don't understand in this day and age, is that, you can get a lot of your stuff you want on YouTube, but to actually go to a clinic or a camp, that's where you really make your contacts. And that's how I made contacts with, to go to USA basketball. One of the major camps I worked was Coach John Wooden's camp at UCLA. And, obviously one of the best college coaches in the world, winning 10 national championships. So I worked his basketball camp for about 10 years. And through that whole process, I met many, many coaches and many people, and I kept in contact with them. And, if they like what you do, then you're going to get other opportunities. So that's why I always tell coaches, when you go work a camp, I mean, you do the very best you can, because you never know who's watching you. And that's what happens. So guys go on to work with USA basketball, and then they see, hey, think about, the guys they worked with. And if you've done a good job, why, you might get the opportunity. So I think, you raise that question of did I ever think I would coach with USA basketball and all the things I did? No, but I always certainly made myself available by attending camps and clinics and making great contacts and staying in touch and just doing, I think, trying to do the best job I could at the time where I was at, not thinking, hey, I want to go here, I want to go there, I want grass is greener on this side of the fence, not wishing I was somewhere else, but doing a great job of where I was at.
I've had a few different coaches on before that become really well-known high school coaches, and a lot of them mentioned that a lot of times, I can imagine you too, had college offers to go become an assistant coach somewhere, even possibly head coach at times. Was that something you ever looked into? Were you ever interested in going in a college route, pursuing any of those opportunities?
Yeah, great question again. The longer I coached high school, first of all, I think that high school age players was what I was really gifted at. I mean, I think that was my niche. I truly enjoyed teaching high school players. They were, those kids are enthusiastic. They love the game of basketball. I think you can have so much of an impression with them. So that's my first thought. Secondly, I had a lot of friends who took the route, who wanted to get into college, and they might have been in college. They might have been a volunteer assistant and worked at a D1 school and volunteer for 2 or 3 years, and then maybe the coach gets fired. they're out of a job. They have to redo, they have to find another job. And I just didn't want that. I was not in that process of not knowing, where you had to start at that level, and and hopefully you worked up to it, which was fine. But I wanted to coach, and so many times young guys get into the college coaching ranks and they find out it's really not coaching basketball. They're doing paperwork, they're doing recruiting, they're doing everything but on the court stuff. And if you really want to coach, high school is a place to be. And I, and some of my really good friends now are selling insurance, and selling insurance isn't a bad thing, but I didn't want to go that route. I wasn't going to be an insurance salesman. So high school basketball for me was really the epitome of where I wanted to be. And I will say this, that, the D3 schools were pretty attractive to me because it wasn't as much of the recruiting part to it. It was more basketball. And I've had the opportunities. I just decided at the time, the timing wasn't quite right. And so I just stayed with high school, and I've loved it ever since. And I think that just coaching some elite players, you mentioned had more than 50 players now in the NBA that I've coached. I think that kind of gave me the pathway of the college coach type thing. So I didn't really need that college coach to get me fulfilled by coaching elite players, because I had that with USA Basketball.
You didn't quite make the jump as you just talked about, but we know there's a lot of discussion always. Guys from high school do take the college jump. Some pan out. We see guys like Coach Nate Oates have been great. A couple of coaches have done that jump. Then also the college to NBA jump. But when you look at that, we know sometimes they are successful. A lot of times too, they don't pan out. What do you think goes into that? Like, we see different examples. Like John Beeline recently obviously didn't quite pan out at Cleveland. Like, what kind of the transition? How do you adjust to that? And why sometimes are they such great college coaches, but it might not translate to NBA or any other level?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Nate Oates is a great example of a high school coach going to a college level. And a lot of the college coaches, start out as Frank Martin from South Carolina. I mean, he was a high school coach and math teacher in Miami for a lot of years. So there's a lot of guys that, have a good high school background and end up in college. First of all, I think a lot of coaches, high school coaches, they're going to jump at the first chance to go to a college, even if they maybe aren't ready for it. But it's a bad job. I mean, there's just a lot of bad jobs. And so if for instance, if I would have taken a assistant job at a bad D1 school and the staff gets fired, I'm back out looking for another job. So, Nate Oates did not take the first job that came to him. He made sure that it was the right fit for him. And I think that's really important. Not just jump at the first thing that comes to you, as well. And then going from the college to the NBA. Well, first of all, the NBA coaching vacancies that are open are with bad teams. I mean, they're just bad teams. So if you're going to take a college coach is going to take the job, it's going to be with a bad team. Very few. I would say Billy Donovan might have stepped into a better situation, and Billy coached. He coached our U19s when I was coaching U17s here with USA Basketball, so I got to know him very, very well as well. So I think his situation was a little different than a lot of the college coaches. Even look at Calipari was in the NBA, Rick Pitino as well. So and they took jobs that were just bad jobs, and obviously, going into the NBA level, it's a business. And if you don't win after 2 or 3 years, you're going to be out. That's why most of them get high paid positions for 5 or 6 years to make sure they have money coming after they get fired. So I think, yeah, you raise a good question. And I think too many young coaches take bad jobs just because they think, well, it's a D1 job. Well, D1 jobs some of them aren't always very good.
You mentioned culture earlier. That's clearly something you have to establish wherever you go, and you've won a ton of games, but you look at each level as once again, you haven't necessarily coached college or that, but you've coached the elite high school guys to USA. Has your culture ever shifted depending on the type of players you're coaching, or is it just kind of one brand of culture you always try coaching by?
Well, yeah, again, you're asking some really good questions because culture is really the players is made up of the players you're coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So that very first job I took in high school, there really wasn't a good culture. And really, let's define what culture is. Culture is really how you do things.
Mm-hmm.
That's what culture is. And so I had to define what culture was to that very first group of kids I had coaching that were really had no program going for them. So we had to develop a culture. We had to develop how we do things. This is how we do things. What are our standards? We don't have rules. We have standards. And so I think standards are part of your culture. So, defense is part of our culture. Uh, Trust is a big part of our culture. Communication. So those things are developed. And then I went to the other school, the second and third school I was at, already had a great program. Both of them did. And so you just kind of add your thoughts, your uh, non-negotiables, so to speak, to those programs to develop the culture. So culture is really kind of contingent on the program you have, and it's kind of contingent on what points of emphasis you have as a coach. And just an example, I go to watch a lot of college practices when I'm out and about, but I go watch Jay Wright at Villanova,
Mm-hmm.
and his culture, it's different than Calipari's at Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
They're both good, but they're just different. Uh, Villanova and Jay Wright have a culture where it's really uh, more of a situation where the kids really understand that, hey, this is a high standard for us. Defense is a high standard for us.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is a high standard. Being a great teammate is a high standard. So those are culture things that get implemented into your program. So I mean, culture is really, really significant. And I think the simplest way, like I said, is to define it as how you do things. And that is part of your culture. And then your culture also has to have buy-in from your players. And if they buy into your culture, well, you're going to have a pretty good team. And culture and chemistry is really two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Because chemistry is how two players interact on your team. What's the chemistry like with your starting five, or what's the chemistry like? But culture includes the whole team. Here's what we do as a team wise. It doesn't just depend on chemistry between two players.
So if you're going to a situation, it's a brand new school, whether it be a high school, prep school, whatever it's looking like for high school, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you're make sure are going to be established for your program?
Well, one of them is great defense, and then we have that with our USA basketball team too. Our culture is how we play defense. Are we pressing? We press all the time. I've pressed all during my high school career as well, different kinds of presses, and then that's a non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable would be uh, being a great teammate. If you don't, if you're not standing up when your teammates come off the court, then you're failing one of our standards. If you're not happy for somebody who scores on the court, you're failing one of our standards. So being a great teammate is really, really important for culture, because that makes, first of all, it really makes players want to play for each other. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. Body language is really a non-negotiable. You know, if on film I see one of our players on the bench that's not engaged in a timeout, whether he's playing or not, that's a non-negotiable. Uh, we have some concerns about that if that doesn't happen. So body language is a big thing. Are you sitting on the bench and you're lackadaisical and you're not cheering for your teammates? That's bad body language. So those things go in as part of your culture. And then obviously on the court, how hard you play. Do you, I go to watch Villanova play, and my goodness, they're on the floor after every loose ball, and they're getting rebounds out of their area, and they're taking charges in practice and games. So that culture goes from practice to games as well. So I think those are some of the things that we look at. Communication is really high priority for a non-negotiable for us, for our kids as well. And we really emphasize those things. Really, non-negotiables are kind of what you emphasize. So I don't think you can have 10 non-negotiables. I think you can have maybe 3 or 4 that you really emphasize on the court, and that's part of your culture.
The high school game has changed drastically. I think especially this past year, a lot more guys are taking this prep route. We see IMGs, we see AZ Compass, we see Montverde. List goes on these prep schools. You couldn't make that route. You kind of were the more traditional high school route.
Yep.
What's your thoughts on that? Is that something you support? Do you like these prep schools forming, or what's kind of your thoughts on this new age of basketball being put together right now?
Well, again, you raised some really good points, and I'm really good friends with the coaches at Montverde and IMG and Oak Hill. Those guys have a really different aspect about basketball. I mean, they never have guys for 4 years. They have guys for maybe 1 or 2 years. So it's more of an all-star type of format. Not that that's any easier to coach, because knowing with USA basketball, you still have to really coach those guys and establish your standards and culture. But it's different than a normal high school. In a normal high school, you have these kids, you see them all the way up through youth basketball, all the way up through high school. So you can kind of pick out players are going to be pretty good and have that desire to play for you in the high school level. So you have a chance to really grow with them. So I think the relationships built at a regular high school program probably are much different than relationships built at a Montverde Academy or IMG or Oak Hill. Not that one's better than the other, but it's just different. And it's same with the coaching with USA basketball. We don't have those kids. We have them for maybe 5 or 6 weeks during the summer. So we get a relationship developed with them, but it's not quite the same as a relationship with your own high school kids. And so there's a difference there. I don't think either one is necessarily wrong or right. I think kids now, obviously the good players want to play with other good players, for one thing. So they're going to go to the Montverdes and the IMGs and the Sunrise Christian Academies and those Lallemiers. So I think that's part of it. Secondly, obviously they want to get, their goal is to get to the NBA. And they have a realistic chance of going to the NBA if they're one of the top players on those teams. Whereas if you're a top player on a regular high school team, you probably don't have that same, maybe the same incentive or same thoughts about playing in the NBA, because you probably don't have that maybe background that these other guys have. So there's a lot goes into it. It's almost like it's a different league. So the teams that have recruiting, I mean, it's like a college level team. So those guys are kind of in a separate league.
Yeah.
They're in their own league, and then the regular high schools are in our own league. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that they're called high schools.
Mm-hmm.
They are, but they're really not a high school program.
Mm-hmm.
They're much more of the elite type of program. So again, a lot of our players that we have play for us come from those schools.
Yep.
Because that's where the elite programs are. But you can't compare apples to apples. That's why I say when the rankings come out with high school basketball, really teams that are prep style teams probably shouldn't be in the same, headlines in the ESPN top 25 or whatever as normal high schools are, because they're just it's not apples to apples.
Now, you have coached, like you said, many of these guys that play this prep level, obviously a lot of NBA guys, college guys. You've coached them at the USA in different places, but if you were an elite level player, you were per se, Jalen Greene, Jayson Tatum, or Colin Sexton, would you say that you'd probably want to look into? Would you heavily consider or even favor going to a prep school where you kind of compete against some of the top players, play with other top guys? Or do you say maybe staying at the local high school is a better fit for them?
I think individually each person has to decide that themselves. what best they can do. And, guys like Colin Sexton, he played for his own high school team as well. Jayson Tatum played for Chaminade Christian out of St. Louis. So it was his high school team. So I think individually, I think they have to decide if they can get where they want to go to with their goals by staying on their high school team. And many of them can, many of them do as well. So it's certainly not a fact that they have to go to a more dominant high school, prep school type of thing than their own high schools. And really, the kids that played with their own high schools, I think, have a little different maybe attitude about, being a good teammate and helping kids that aren't quite as good as them along in their basketball career as well.
Now, there was one main stop I really wanted to get into throughout your career. That's where you spent majority of it. You won 446 games out there, won multiple state championships, many, many awards. Kind of take us through playing at Mid-Prairie and what it was like coaching out there, and just take us through that run.
Well, yeah, that was my alma mater, and I played for really a great coach at Mid-Prairie. And so the job had been open earlier, and I didn't really take it a couple of years before I did take it. And then they offered to me again, and things just kind of fell in place. My wife got a kindergarten teaching job there as well. And our kids, we have a son and a daughter, and they were both young, very young at the time. And, we just thought how it'd really be fun for them to be around cousins and grandparents and, uncles and aunts and everything. So my first thought was, I'll go back to my alma mater. And I think many coaches have this in mind as well. Stay maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years at the most, and then move on to some other place. Well, after 28 years, I was still there, and really had retired from teaching. Was still coaching there, but a lot of things happen when you go back to your alma mater. First of all, you end up coaching. You coach a lot of players that their parents really well. You might have went to school with them. You might have, they were around the community, and I was very fortunate to be a really good player there. So a lot of people remembered me as a player at Mid-Prairie, and that kind of added probably a little more extra pressure than maybe I thought it would. But in the end, you're still just coaching kids, and you're still doing the same thing. I didn't change the way I coached at Mid-Prairie than I did when I was at Elkader Central before, or Lone Tree before, or even I never changed really the way I coached from that between and USA basketball. I coached the elite kids the same way I coached my high school team. And everybody, I think every player really, if they're serious about basketball, they want to get better. And if you can challenge them, here's how you get better. That's how they buy into what you want done. And so, the skill development was really big. We had kids that, obviously played a lot in the summertime. I was not real big on having our kids do a lot of playing games in the summer. I just think kids play too many games and not enough skill work. I tell players, if you play a full game and you take maybe 10 shots, a game, that's pretty good for a player on a team. Don't tell me you're become a better shooter because you only took 10 shots. You need to work on your shooting outside of playing. So I think too many players think that they can become a really good player and all they do is play games. Well, that just isn't true, in my opinion. So one of the things at Mid-Prairie is we really had kids that really wanted to get better skill wise, and their skill development was really good in the off season. They had, and I can't say everybody on the team was really into some, high school team. Many of them play for different reasons. Many of them play because their friends play, and they like basketball, but they're not in love with it. They don't want to play at the next level. But then you have a core group of about 4, 5, or 6 players who love it, who are going to play it all the time, who really want to get better, and that's what you really have to deal with. So that's kind of the way with Mid-Prairie. And then after I actually after I took teams after 28 seasons, we had a lot of success there, and I had retired from the teaching part. I was athletic director, retired from that, but still coached. The opportunity came up at Iowa City High, and that was just a really a neat experience and the way to kind of end my career at the high school level by coaching there.
You mentioned something that's kind of critical that I know is heavily debated by a lot of people today from all levels discuss this, and that is the offseason workouts and playing AAU, playing high school ball, not getting enough training in. Kind of take us through that. Well, obviously, we know AAU has become a huge thing with the EYBL, 3SSB, and now UAA circuit and all that. What's your thoughts? How should a player handle that? Just kind of take us through what you think and thoughts are on AAU, high school balancing it all. How would you do that?
Well, that's a huge topic, and I could probably go on about an hour with that topic. The AAU teams years ago, every team was a member of the AAU, which is an organization. Nowadays, it's mostly just outside school teams because AAU is really taking a back seat. But I think there's a definite need for your EYBL teams and your outside school teams. But I think to go along with that, there's a definite need to wrap those games around skill development. So if you just do skill development, that's not enough. And if you just play games, that's not enough. So I think there's got to be a nice correlation between the two. And I always think, I always say that I think kids play too many games. On a weekend, they may play 3 games on a Saturday, 3 games on a Sunday. And what I found out, and even our elite players say this, is that the games aren't competitive anymore, as competitive, because they play one game. If they win or lose, well, it doesn't matter. I'm playing again in 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Well, if I lose that game, well, big deal. We got another game in 2 hours. So really the competitive nature of the games have been diminished when you play, 2 and 3 games in a day. And so I think that has really affected high school players a lot. The number one thing I get from NBA scouts, and all 30 of them, I have a pretty good relationship with all 30 team scouts, is the number one question they always ask is, what is the competitive level of like a Jayson Tatum or a Colin Sexton or whatever? And so not all elite players really have that high competitive level. And there's a big difference between working hard and being competitive. Thousands of kids work hard. I have to laugh a little bit when they interview players that win a championship. Well, all the hard work we put in finally paid off. Well, you know what? There's a lot of kids on that team that finished second that worked just as hard as you did, too. So the hard work and competitive nature of players, I think, is different. And so how you construct that being competitive is, the game's got to mean something. And if the games don't mean anything, then there's no competitive juices that flow for players. And we see that with some of the elite players that we have in. Some are extremely competitive. I'll give you an example. Gary Trent Jr. was one of the most competitive kids that I've coached. And had he not been that level of competitiveness, he wouldn't be starting with the Portland Trailblazers now, because he was a second round pick or a low first round or whatever. So I think Colin Sexton is in that category, Jayson Tatum. So those guys really compete at every game they're in, where some guys don't compete. And I think that's where the tournaments have maybe a bad vibe. When I go watch players play, sometimes it's really bad basketball. Well, it's bad basketball because that's a third game in a day, and they're tired, and they don't have the juices to really play hard. And I think a lot of kids now have what they call trainers. I mean, they hire their own trainers, which is good and bad. But by the same token I think the skills they really have to work on other than shooting, footwork, rebounding, screening, dribbling, ball handling, of course, like I said, shooting. Those are the kind of things that they have to work on a daily basis in order to get better.
One last high school thing I want to touch up on before we really get into McDonald, Jordan, obviously into USA a lot, but that is, we look at your high school career, 42 seasons, 600 plus wins. You won 16 district championships, 6 state championships. You also were 9-time coach of the year. If you look back at all those years, is there one year in particular that really stands out to you? Like one team that you just kind of put above others in terms of just super special or just a special group of guys you enjoyed the most?
As I think about that, I've been asked that question a lot. Obviously, teams that you win state championships with are special. I mean, a lot goes into that. But there's some teams that have really, like for instance, my second year at my first job. They had been 0-36. We actually won some games that first year. The second year, we really turned a corner and won some games that we shouldn't have. That was a special year. I mean, I look back on that year. That was, we won a sectional game, which is kind of the first tournament game they won in probably forever. But that was a special team. And so I look back on some of those City High. The first couple teams I had were really, it was not a very good program, but then the last couple teams some of those teams were really special because of what we accomplished. And then, like I said, teams that go to the state tournament, win state championships are always special too. But I think more so than really what they've accomplished is the actual players on the team. The relationships you had with those players on the team, and really you don't know how special some of those guys are, some of those teams are until 15, 20 years down the road when you get invited to weddings and you get baby announcements, they've been married and having a baby, so those are really the special things that I think you look back on as a coach. And when you've had 42 different teams, a lot of those were special, but in really different ways.
You had a couple of different opportunities that were incredible. There's a different opportunity we know right now is a hot topic. Everyone talking McDonald's All-American team just got announced, and you had the opportunity to do that in 1999. You guys won the team. You represented the West out there, and you coached a lot of big time players: Mike Dunleavy, Carlos Boozer, Nick Collison, Jason Richardson. A lot of people were on that team. What was that like? And first of all, just how did you learn that you got that invite to be able to become the coach for them?
Yeah, that was, well, first of all, the game was held in Iowa, at Ames, Iowa, on the campus of Iowa State. So I'm sure they they always pick a local coach or a state coach that to coach that. And I had come off 2 or 3 really, really good years with my high school team. And so that was really kind of a surprise, obviously. And that was my first really experience at camps. I worked some Nike camps as well, but coaching a team, that was really my first experience of coaching elite players. That McDonald's game. And Casey Jacobson was on that team, and we just had some really fun players that I'm very fortunate to still keep in contact with. In fact, Jonathan Bender, who was on our team, obviously got hurt and had a limited NBA career, but he actually broke Michael Jordan's scoring record in that game. And that was a lot of fun, just stuff like that. But so yeah, that was a great opportunity. It was at Iowa State campus. We had an Iowa player in that, Nick Collison, went on to start at Kansas and then played 18, 19 years for the Thunder for Oklahoma City, and so those were just really a great time and fun years and a fun year. And I think anytime you have an opportunity, again, you have an opportunity, you really have to. Opportunities like that don't come around very often. Mm-hmm. And so as a high school coach, I certainly made sure I was prepared with what we were going to do and how to approach these elite players, which I never really had as a team before. So, and it worked out really well. And like I said, I have a lot of really good memories and still relationships from players on those teams.
You mentioned the one guy I really want to kind of discuss, and that's Nick Collison, because I know not a lot of players are always familiar with him, but I think that's the guy that a lot of people should become more familiar with because we know there's a star player. He's obviously who you probably want to model game after watch, but he's a guy that started in the NBA for I think 17 years and just had a leadership role for the final couple of years. Has Jersey retired, made a lot of money, was a part of a championship run, a lot of different stuff in the NBA. Obviously, like Kansas was successful, but he's truly like we talked about earlier, that kind of that culture building kind of player. Guy's just a true leader. Did you see that in him though? Did you kind of see that he could have a long career just based on his leadership, just based on that kind of aspect to his game?
No, there was no question that I knew. I really felt at the time that he was going to be one of those NBA guys who's going to be in the league a long time. He was one of the. He didn't have a lot of what I call a big circle with him. Some of the elite players have cousins and uncles and aunts who want to be who want to take advantage of a player. Well, his circle was really small. His mom and dad and so it was really small. And he was what we call a great locker room guy. I mean, you put him in a locker room and you knew that locker room, those guys were going to be ready to play a game because Nick was in there. You didn't have to worry about getting ready to play a game. You didn't have to worry about guys messing around in the locker room. You didn't have to worry about back talking. You didn't have to worry about them not accepting things that we worked on from a coaching standpoint, because Nick made sure that those guys were on the same page. And that's what a good locker room guy does. He just makes sure. And so even though he was kind of a quiet leader, he was certainly a leader that we knew was going to be a really good player at the next level.
It is a role that I think we're seeing less and less guys accept now. Udonis Haslam's a huge one. We know he's coming down to the final wire out there in Miami. Jared Dudley's really emerged as that for LA in the past year or so. A couple other guys have kind of become that role to a degree, but out of all you've now coached through USA and other experiences, has there been that leader kind of guy, a guy like Nick Collison you've coached the USA? And if so, who are some of those guys?
Well, the guys who really stick out are, first of all, the ones that are very competitive and they hold their teammates to a high standard. It's one thing for them to, they obviously have a high standard. Jayson Tatum has a high standard for himself. Colin Sexton, Tyus Jones has a high standard. Harry Giles, who's starting to get more playing time now with the Portland Trailblazers. Those guys had high standards for themselves, but to really take it to the next level, like Nick did, Collison, are guys who hold other players accountable to high standards. So when we talk about, Brad Beal, he certainly has a high standard for himself, but he holds his teammates very highly accountable as well. Brad Beal, when he played for us, Jahlil Okafor was that kind of player. Obviously the NBA game is not quite to fit what his skills are, but he's still in the NBA after 5 or 6 years and making a great salary. So he's when Jabari Parker's kind of the same level. The NBA game may not have been really geared to what his skills are, but he's a great kid. He's a great person. He's got high standards. Of course, guys like Colin Sexton are just off the chart competitive wise. A guy I really am happy for right now is Josh Jackson. Josh, he struggled a little bit with Phoenix. I think he kind of got off on the wrong foot with some of his teammates down there and coaches. Now he's with Detroit and he's playing 25, 30 minutes a game. He's scoring well. He's just such an outstanding athlete. I hope this season kind of propels him to great things. Then you have guys like, obviously I keep mentioning Jayson Tatum, but Jalen Greene, who's playing the G League team right now. He's one of those guys who he's probably, if he really focuses, he's probably one of those guys who's kind of a can't miss guy in the NBA. I mean, athletic ability, shoots the ball well, all the other good stuff that goes with it. So, Jalen Suggs is off the charts. He and Gary Trent Jr. probably might be the two most competitive kids I've ever coached, but the nice thing about them is you never had to worry about your team playing hard because they were the hardest playing players on your team. They led by example, and they were going to, whatever it took, they were going to lead by example. And so I think that's really a big thing when you can lead, not only communication wise, but when you can lead by example, then it sets a tone for the whole team.
You've seen some of these top ranked guys, and I've got to know a lot of guys in the past few classes now. And we know that when you're a top 3, top 5, top 10 recruit, there's a lot of pressure on you. Some of these guys are getting it since middle school, as early as a guy like Mikey Williams we're seeing right now. They get all this attention, all this followers since middle school through high school and then college, NBA. And it's difficult, builds up on guys. And you mentioned Josh Jackson, obviously he was that top level guy, struggled a little bit, starting to find that footing. But how would you see the guys, how do guys as a top prospect deal with that pressure? How would you deal with that? Like, just kind of take us through that whole process of being able to still pan out and make it in the NBA while having this pressure build up after so many years.
Well, yeah, I think they got to be really careful who they surround themselves with. Next year's draft, we have Cade Cunningham. The top 5 is probably going to be Cade Cunningham, Mobley, Jalen Suggs. I think Scotty Barnes will be right up there. Jalen Greene will be up there. I mean, that's all 5 of them played for us. And so, as I evaluate those kids, they were really focused on just what they could do to get better. They didn't really worry. They didn't really focus on all the perimeter stuff, all the social media. None of those guys are really into social media. I mean, they obviously read it some, but they're not, they don't have their own. They're not really branded as some kids are. They, get a brand. I think Mickey Williams kind of has his own brand already, and those kind of things. So I think the guys that I mentioned that are going to be in the top 5 pick that all played for us are really narrowly focused, and I think that's really helped them. And they understand that it's a lot of work to get where they want to go to. I think too many guys that don't make it where they want to make it are too entitled. The 5 guys I mentioned, there's no entitlement there. They know that I've got to earn it. Nobody's going to give me anything. I go out and prove it every day, type of thing. So I think that's really been a big factor for the guys that kind of have that ulterior motive and more narrow focus, and their circle is narrow. They don't have a lot of guys telling them things. We always tell our kids that come in here to the USA, you have a lot of guys telling you things that you want to hear. Well, you need some people. You need some people in your group to tell you some things that maybe you don't want to hear. That's how you get better. So it's kind of it's great to see those guys mature at a young age and understand that, hey, I'm not entitled to anything. I have to work hard. I have to compete every day. I have to get better. And the guys that make it, that's what they do.
Started coaching elite guys a little bit before social media, because we know it just started happening. 2012, 13, 14 really blew up with Instagram, Twitter, all this stuff. How much harder have you noticed and seen social media make it for guys to be sustain at greatness and really reach that pinnacle of becoming an elite player?
Well, social media is with us to stay. There's no doubt about it. I think there's just the guys who spend way too much time on social media could be spending their minutes much better getting better at the game of basketball. And so I think the guys who understand, again, have more narrow focus, the guys who understand that, the social media isn't always good, that there's a lot of negative things that happen on social media. If they start listening and reading and believing what they see and hear on social media, then I think they get in trouble. And really, the good players, they know that, they can't listen, they can't believe a lot of things that happen on social media. So they have a much clearer mind as to what, really where they stand as a player and who to trust. I think they have to find out who to trust in their circle.
This guy's always elite guys. When you look at them and their work ethic, we talked about that a little bit earlier. What does that look like in terms of how many hours would you say an elite player puts in to make that huge jump to become the best NBA player that you've coached so far, or Bradley Beal, Jayson Tatum, those guys? What's the day work for them? Is it 2, 3 workouts a day, training? How long is each workout? Like, what does the work ethic of an elite player look like?
I don't think it's so much how long they work; it's
Mm-hmm.
what they do when they work. I mean, I go watch, when I go watch trainers train guys, you know, if you're going one on one with a workout, if you put in 45 minutes to an hour, and you're really going all out, that's a hard workout. So most of these guys, especially in the NBA now, their workouts are 30, 40 minutes, but they are extremely difficult workouts for that period of time, as opposed to being in the gym 2 hours and getting up 10 shots in 10 minutes, those kind of things. That doesn't happen to the good players. They're really focused on really what they need to do, whether it's left hand work, whether it's they all spend time on some shooting because that's obviously something that needs to be worked on. My point with skill development is you never get good enough that you graduate from a skill. In other words, Stephen Curry, he's probably arguably the best shooter in the game of basketball, but he still makes 300 to 500 shots after every practice. So he's not good enough that he can say, you know what, I graduated from this skill, I don't have to work on it anymore. That doesn't happen in the game of basketball. You still have to go back and refresh your skills. So we find that happening, especially with guys who really want to go to the next level and be good at the next level. So the workout, I think, is not extensive, but it's really a tough workout that they go through. I know the trainer who trains Damian Lillard very well, and so he trains him, but it's only for like 40 minutes at a time. But by the end of that 40 minutes, I mean, most normal people could not go through that workout because that's how tough it is. And they pick out things that they are weak at that they need to work on. They don't work on, if they're really strong at one thing, they're not going to work on their right hand dribble because they're really strong at it. They're going to work on their left hand dribble or going to their left, finishing around the basket. So picking out things they need to work on. And then I think the second part of that is your conditioning. And the conditioning is really on the players because during a season that, practices aren't conditioning. The players have to be in condition. And I've seen way too many players come into a season that are not quite in good condition, and that's on them, and that's on anybody else. And so the conditioning part to it, whether it's running sprints, jumping rope, lifting weights, whatever, that has to be a session that the players work on. So the conditioning aspect, the skill development aspect, and then a lot of players will end up playing 3-on-3, 4-on-4, depending on who's available in that city they're working in. So they put strength and conditioning, they put skill development, and then they put competition in. So that's kind of a day, obviously a day's work in what they're doing.
We always hear the Kobe mentality, and we've heard now, obviously, Jimmy Butler obviously has that work ethic where he's getting in the gym 2 a.m. We heard stories of 3 a.m. and that stuff. Have you heard of those stories? Have you seen or witnessed guys that are at your Team USA camps, get to the gym, even as long as your guys' days are out there, but get there really earlier than anyone else that gets to work? And if so, who are some of those guys?
Well, yeah, you've heard. I mean, I've witnessed Kobe Bryant work out at 4:00. But when he gets there at 4:00, he's very organized and what he does to work out. He'll have a trainer there to help him, and he'll have a very definite program of working out. So he may be done by 5:30, go eat breakfast, come back, do some weight training after that and stuff. So I think his day, he just liked that part of the day to work out. Other guys, they like to work out at 10 o'clock at night. They come and do conditioning. So I don't think the time of day really makes that much difference. I think what you do and what you feel comfortable with during that time is really, really important. I mean, we've had guys that come in with USA basketball. I think a lot of the guys I mentioned are ones that are early in practice. They'll get their shots up or they'll stay late. playing shooting games with each other, working on their ball skills a little bit, and that's why they are where they are today. Jayson Tatum wouldn't be where he is on an all-star team, or Brad Beal starting for an all-star team, had they not recognized that this is a time I can get some extra shots in, or I can get some extra footwork drills in, or I'm going to work on my rebounding a little bit off the glass. So I think all those guys, if they're really serious about attaining that next level, they're the ones that'll come in and do it.
My last couple questions I want to ask you before we really just get in a couple more things about USA is you were part of Jordan Brand Classic as well. 2005 was your first year doing it, then you did it again. 2012, both years you were part of games that featured guys like Lou Will, Andrew Bynum, CJ Miles. The other one had a lot of the big time guys, Jeremy Grant, Steven Adams. Take us through those two experiences, though.
It was, you've done your homework, so good question. The Jordan games are different. Actually, the Jordan game is a little different than even the McDonald's game, and of course, those games are different than our USA basketball training camps and games, because those are all-star games. We have to put a team together for USA basketball. So, we may not pick some of the guys who are really good in our top 12. Example, Darius Garland didn't make our team, and he starts now for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Just guys like that who were really good, but we just had too many at his spot, whatever the reason. So the all-star games are just an accumulation of, 12 good guys, 12 really good players. And it's not so much that they're a great team, they're just great players. And so both the McDonald's game and the Jordan Classic do that. But they're very well-run events. They do a great job for charity. They recognize players, and I think that's really important. Recognize really good players that have graduated. And so I think it's just a different atmosphere with the Jordan game, McDonald's game, than it is with USA basketball. The Jordan game was really fun. It was played in New York City. You just have, Jordan was there. You got your picture taken with Michael Jordan, and all those kind of things are really, really neat. Nike does a great job, of course, of promoting the game, and it was a sellout, 14,000, 15,000 at the game. So as well as the McDonald's game. So those are just fun games to coach in. How much coaching really takes place, I'm not sure. I mean, we try and coach a little bit, give the players some semblance of organization. I think is better word to do it than really coach. You want them to look like they're organized with what they're doing. Give them some sets to play, and then let them play out of it, type of thing. So really, kind of a different mindset going into those type of games.
Now, before we get into USA, this includes USA guys too, but who is the one player you'd say between your McDonald's All-American game, the two Jordan Brand, and all your times at USA, who's the one player that you'd say is, you kind of looked down and you said, he's locked in, he's going to become a superstar in the NBA, like you're the most confident in him panning out?
Well, I mean, Nick Collison has to be right up there, because I really felt he was going to be a lock in the NBA. I think I felt that about Brad Beal. I think I felt Brad was, just because he could really shoot it so well. Jayson Tatum, I thought could be good. I didn't think he could be this good this quick. This is only his fourth year in the league. And he's already signed an extension on his contract for unbelievable amount of money. He's made the All-Star team now twice. So I didn't think he'd be this good this quick with his skill, but he certainly has really managed his skill with his life in the fact that that's what he wanted to do. I really felt Colin Sexton was going to make a really good NBA player, just because of his quickness, and he was just so fun to play with, and kids loved to play with him. I really felt he was going to be one of those guys who were going to get drafted. And, one of the guys that we haven't mentioned that's probably started out as really a low draft pick, maybe even a second round pick, but shot up to number 5 is Isaac Okoro. Isaac played with us. He plays for the Cleveland Cavaliers now. Great defender. He's one of those kids who you just saw, man, did he get better? And he got better and he got better. every day. So I didn't think he'd be a number 5 pick, but I thought he would certainly be with the team and stick with it in the NBA for a long time.
That is a little quick question I want to touch up on because I'm personally a huge fan of what Cleveland built there. I think the addition of Jared Allen's a huge piece for them.
Yep.
Isaiah Okoro, and then you mentioned Garland and Sexton. Obviously, I think they're one superstar kind of guy away, which they could land this upcoming draft, as loaded as it is.
Right.
How special do you think that group is? We know the Sexton and Darius Garland group. I just mentioned Okoro. Jared Allen's looking special. How special do you think that young core is, knowing a lot of those guys?
I think it's really a neat, great core. I think they're probably missing kind of a veteran. Love has been injured so often; he hasn't played that much. I think they're kind of missing that veteran guy who just in the locker room kind of can manage egos a little bit with those young kids, or maybe egos isn't even a good term, but can kind of manage the level that they get to. They're going to be. Kobe Altman is their general manager. He actually worked. He actually was with us on 2 of our trips in 09 and 10 with the Brad Beal group, and so Kobe's a good friend of mine. We probably talk weekly about different players, and so a lot of the players he had obviously played for us, and he loves them, and so I really respect Cleveland a lot, and Kobe's done a great job there as GM. But I love their young kids, and they're just going to continue to get better and better. The one game I look at, they beat the Nets here 2 or 3 weeks ago on triple overtime, I think it was, or double overtime, and Sexton had like 42 points and just really rattled. Obviously he's not going to do that every game, but he's been really consistent in what he does. And Darius has filled his role, and Isaac Okoro has filled his role, and all those 3 guys are all, and Andre Drummond was with them. And so, those 4 guys are all USA basketball guys as well.
You see all these guys you've coached through all the different variations of time live out their dream. You see them making the money, living out the dream, playing basketball in the NBA, being even successful players in the NBA. How does that make you feel, though? What's it like looking at all these guys you've impacted throughout their careers pan out and live out what they ultimately wanted to
do? Obviously, I'm very proud of the fact I had a chance to work with them. I don't know if I had any effect on their play or where they are now, but I certainly have a good relationship with a lot of them, as far as we text back and forth, and Colin Sexton, he and I, Jayson, Tatum, Brad Beal, we just do a lot of back and forth texts, and so I feel really obviously proud about that. I think what I feel best about with those kids is how good of people they are. They're not entitled. They still remember where their roots were. I mean, they're only 5 or 6 years out of high school. A lot of those kids are, and so they still remember their roots. They're still, Coach Showalter type of thing. So they really have a lot of respect for what our program was with USA Basketball, and they have a lot of respect for playing with USA Basketball. And I think, that really makes me proud from that standpoint. So great memories there, but they're down the road. There'll be a lot more memories with those guys, and how they play. Just how they play, how they conduct themselves. Their character is really off the charts.
Absolutely. Let's really get into this USA, because 62-0, we know that you guys, obviously USA is the most talent, but that's still impressive. We've seen USA basketball at the professional level recently lost a year or so ago. 62-0 is hard to do, and you won 10 straight championships. How has this journey been, and what's it just been like knowing that you have been pretty much perfect throughout your entire USA coaching career?
Well, and I think each year I'm not sure pressure is the right word, but this goes with high school coaching too. The more success you have, I think you never get a bad game from an opponent. I mean, you play France, you play Argentina, you play Spain, you play Turkey, who got great programs. You play, China, who's up and coming. They're all, the one thing they know is if they're going to have a chance of getting a medal. Canada's right there; they have a lot of good players. But if they're going to get a gold medal or they're going to get medal, they have to go through us. So they're not really preparing to play anybody else. They're preparing to play us. And so I think each time we win a gold medal, that next year adds to the pressure that we go through. And again, I'm not sure it's pressure, but it certainly is something that we deal with, and um, it's harder than it looks, because I know people comment a lot. Well, you had all the best players. It's easy to win. Well, you have to build a culture. You have to make a team. You have to take guys that have started all their lives and were the best player on their team, and now they might be seventh or eighth guy. Isaac Okoro, he only averaged about 14 minutes, 15 minutes a game for us. And he was an all-state kid and made all the all-star teams. So I think you have to really be able to manage those different kind of situations that you have with the team, and obviously the more success that we've had, I think the easier it is to get players to buy in, because once you won 2, 3, 4, 5 gold medals, well, the players are going to buy in because they've seen that this works with the previous teams. You've already won 5 gold medals, so whatever you're doing must work. So I'm going to buy into what you're doing, and I think that makes a big difference. And we had guys. Jayson Tatum actually came off the bench for us a few times.
Yep.
Jalen Greene was a sixth man. He ended up being MVP of the World Championship in U17s. Colin Sexton came off the bench for us at times. He ended up being MVP of the U17 World Championship. So those guys have to take on different roles, and for them to buy into different roles, and just to make our team better is hats off to them, because at the end they want to win. Mm-hmm. At the end they want to win. They won the gold medal, and for the most part they're going to do what they have to do to get that gold medal.
You said China's looking nice. I think Canada's going to has a bright future, but I think long term, obviously, we know USA should always be the favorites to win. But what other countries do you think really are looking special? Like you said, China, you mentioned Canada. I think Australia has some talent. France is a unique young core. Yep. Who else do you think really is there could even be some competition to USA? Like, who's looking specialist really developing basketball at a high level right now?
Well, I think France is really doing a good job with I look at what they're doing with their young kids. They're 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, and I spent a lot of time with a lot of those teams over in Europe at camps and stuff like that. So, Spain has they have a great programs in place. None of them have high school programs like we do. We have great high school programs, so they have to do something different. So their club programs. Spain's really got a good one. They're just, their whole process is really good. I'd say Spain, France is good. Serbia is always. Serbia probably doesn't have the young athletes. They have more. They take them more when they're 16, 17, and then really develop them. One of the countries I think is kind of up and coming is Finland. They have some really good. They do a great job with their youth teams, and they're putting a lot of money into their youth teams and clubs. Italy used to be, I think they've a lot of it is money driven. So, obviously in Europe, soccer is a big thing. So a lot of the money sponsorship goes to soccer as opposed to basketball. Turkey has been consistently really good. We played them one year for a gold medal in U17s. Obviously Australia has a great situation in Australia. They have good development there, so that's a team that's really taken off. China's just getting better with what they're doing. I think we need to watch some teams from Africa. I think Africa is going to be the next big. Mali was in our U17 tournament the last we had, and we played Mali. They're big, they're strong, they're really pretty good. When they get together with their skills and they start at a younger age and develop their kids at a younger age, they're going to be really good. So I think Africa is going to be Sudan, and Africa is going to be really. So those African nations they're very basketball centric teams, and I think they're going to be teams that really need to be watched because they're going to be really good.
Now we've heard a lot of debate. Mark Cuban came out, I believe it was a year ago, and said if he could go if he had an elite son, he probably would want to put him to the European system, do all that kind of stuff. We've heard some guys like Moussa Diabate from France, he's out here playing at IMG now, going to Michigan. He decided to come to America to play. They all have different opinions though. Some like the club route, some like coming to America to play. Ultimately, what is the best thing? What's your thoughts on taking a club route as opposed to high school or prep, whatever that look, AAU, all that stuff? Like, what do you like more between these different systems of different countries?
I think it's kind of individual wise for most of them. Mark Cuban's statement was a good one, but however, I would say, how many players actually come out of Serbia or Latvia, percentage wise, not very much. There's still USA players that are much more, maybe one or two of the guys make it from the NBA from Latvia or several from Serbia or whatever. So there's not a great amount of number, but the ones that do make it are pretty good. The European model, international model, along with the South American model, the club model, I think is good from the standpoint that they start those kids at a young age in the same system. So we have kind of a smattering of systems as the kids go through junior high, youth, junior high, middle school, junior high, high school, club teams, whatever. So they're in a lot of different systems, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's it's bad. But I don't think there's any one of them that's is especially that good. I always tell I kid with coaches that are really good friends of mine that coach international basketball. Well, where do you send your kids to get better? Canada. Where do they send their kids? United States. A lot of European kids come to the United States to get better. So, don't tell me our system's broken because you send your kids to it to get better. So obviously we must have something going for our kids as well, our players as well, that we're doing something right. If players from other countries want to come to the States to play.
Couldn't agree more. And there's one guy you mentioned too that I really have always wondered. I'm a huge fan of, and that's Andre Drummond. He's a guy that we've seen. You'd think a guy that leads the NBA in rebounds now, I think 4 or 5 years straight. He's going to go down to the top 10 all-time rebounder if he keeps up this pace. Yes, he can't shoot the threes that well. We know that, but just what he brings to a team is huge. But I think we see a lot of NBA teams don't have the same value as he probably should, in my opinion.
Yep.
You kind of discussed it. You talked to GM scouts. What goes into that? Like, what's behind Andre Drummond? Why do you think that he might not be as valuable when he is the most dominant rebounder in the NBA today?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things enter into that. The NBA is kind of going away from the big post center. A lot of teams now, you have to be able to play more of a forward type of, the Jokic and the Doncic type of players where, you're 6'9", 6'10", but you're perimeter, you can play on the perimeter as well as inside. Andre is very specific in what he can do. I mean, his skills are very specific.
Yeah.
He's a great rebounder. And so is a team giving up other things, maybe shooting, maybe ball handling, whatever, to get a great rebounder? Is that worth it to them? So I think that's kind of what goes into that. Andre's a great person, high character. There's never any problem with that. But sometimes I just don't think teams want that fit. They want somebody that has a little different kind of skill set than what he brings. I mean, he'll be in the league a long time just because he can rebound.
Absolutely. And a couple more things before I let you go. One of which is these construction of Team USA basketball teams. And you've brought it up a few times, but that's something I've always loved seeing because you mentioned a guy like Darius Garland you knew was great. Just didn't fit the team though. But how do you construct these rosters? What's the pieces you need? Kind of take us through. You construct this Team USA roster. What goes into this? Who makes it? How do you decide that?
Well, everybody we invite to a training camp, there's myself and then the national team director that we actually go see. We want, before we invite them, we want to see a player play. And so we don't want to, we never invite anybody off of film. I mean, I watch a lot of film, but we don't invite anybody just off film. We go watch them play. So I think there's some things that really, we call them buckets, that we really look into. First of all, they got to be smart, have a high IQ, Colin Sexton type of high IQ, uh, you know, Jayson Tatum IQ. So they got to be smart. Um, Secondly, they gotta have some versatility. In other words, they got to be able to play maybe more in one position. You got to be a good enough ball handler to maybe play out front, and maybe have enough strength to play around the basket. So versatility is really important for us. So smart, being versatile, obviously skills. They have a good skill level. Um, and when we talk about skills, can they rebound? Can they shoot? Ball handling, footwork, uh, setting good screens are important. So skill set. The other one is resilience. Are they resilient? I mean, when something doesn't go their way, are they resilient enough to to come back the next time, play the next play? A lot of players I go watch, when their team's ahead by 10 or 15, they're really good. When their team's down by 10 or 15, they're not very good. So resilience, I think, is really high on our list for that. And then the last one is toughness. How tough are they? Do they dive on the floor after loose ball, or do they think, that's not my job? Can they get a rebound outside of their area? Do they, so I think those are the 5 main things we look at. And then we combine that with what we call skills that take no talent. Being a great teammate, work ethic, attitude, coachability, body language. You put those things with what I said first, then you have an exceptional player. And that's kind of what we look at.
I know from the outside world, we don't need to say specific names exactly, but there are sometimes guys that might be a top 5 ranked player, superstar guy that doesn't always go to Team USA training camp or doesn't even make the team.
Right?
I discussed that, like when there is a guy that we know is special, and you might even know, yeah, he's talented, but you've seen other things, rather be a grade problem, character issue. How often is that, and how valuable is that when you say, okay, this kid is special, but he does have other sides off the court? Is that something that you guys value? And if so, how much does it impact those type of kids?
Huge impact. First of all, when we have, like, if we have a U16 training camp, people don't understand they have to be born in a certain year. So a lot of the kids, let's say a lot of the kids that are sophomores now, are going to be too old for our training camp, and Mickey Williams is too old, for instance. So a lot of people understand they got to be age-wise eligible. That's not our rule. That's a FIBA rule. So they got to be born in a certain year. So next year's U16 kids got to be born in 2000 to be eligible. 2005, we'll take some 2006 kids that are a little younger. So if they're too old, we can't even invite them. So I think that's one thing that we have to look. We got to get their birth date right away. Like I said, Mickey Williams is too old. A lot of the sophomores that are good are too old for invites with that. And then secondly, we really have to really decide how to make a team. So we invite 30 to 35 players to our training camp, and then we'll spend about a week with them, cut it down to 14, and then cut it down to 12. So in that time frame, we really get a good idea of who fits together, how they, what positions they can play, how versatile they are, how resilient, how tough, how skilled, how smart they are. We really get a good idea of that in the first week. And then we cut it down to 14 and go through about another 5, 6, 7 days of 2-a-day practices, and then cut it down to our traveling team of 12.
And as you mentioned, though, with a guy like a Mikey or some of these guys, we know it's a lot more typical guys are being held back, and mostly middle school, sometimes in high school, to get themselves rather another year. And we've seen it a lot right now because of the pandemic, which I can understand this one a little bit more too. But what's your thoughts on the holdback era and all these guys reclassing down, reclassing up? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's 7 players that we check now that graduated early and that are in colleges, that have enrolled in there. Trey Patterson going to Villanova is one of them. So, boy, I think that's individually is tough. It's tough to put just a general umbrella over them, because I think individually that has to be how they see, them fitting in. For most of them, I think staying with their age group is the best. And now if they're really talented and they think that that's going to help them move to reclassify up. I've seen it hamper them more than help them in a lot of cases. I haven't seen hardly anybody, classify down, obviously, but there's been a few. I think we have a few eighth graders that go to a different school and they'll stay in eighth grade that next year. So that that's one way of they're classifying up with that. So I mean it's a trend that's going to happen, and I think it just depends on individually what's best for the player.
Absolutely. My last thing related to USA basketball, we talked about in the beginning. You guys are getting ready to go back out there. Hopefully, can go out there, have a tournament this year, get back in the flow of things. Who are some guys on the younger teams that you're excited to kind of see? Who's some guys that maybe you've heard about, witnessed already play that you think is special in the 2023 class, 2022? Like, who's some guys you're special that we should look out for?
Well, I think there's a couple players that really stick out. Juan Wagner, who's a young kid. His dad obviously played in the pros. He's really going to be good. He's a U16 kid. He's going to be amazingly good. So he's probably the best of that class. In fact, he could probably be in a class ahead and be really good as well. So there's a couple kids out of New Jersey. One, Tariq Watson, 6'8" player out of Don Bosco High School in New Jersey. It's really has come on strong. I think he's going to be one of those. A couple kids out of Texas that are really 6'9", 6'10". There's a 7-footer out of California. It's intriguing, Dennis Evans, that I think could be one of those kids that makes a big jump. Kid out of Florida, the Rock School in Florida, Ryan Jones, a 6'8" player. He's a 2006 birth year, so he's young, but he's a man child at 6'8". He's going to be, I think he's going to be awesome. Jalen Curry, point guard out of North Carolina, is in that mix. But I think the ultimate Juan Wagner is probably the best in that group that we've seen. Tariq Watson's going to be really good in that group. Kid out of Bishop O'Dowd in Oakland, Jalen Lewis, 6'8" kid that has started as a freshman for that program, is really good as well. So those are some of the names that obviously we're looking at and that we've seen. And I think down the road, you're going to hear a lot about them.
Absolutely, Coach. My final question for you, I was wrapping up with everyone I interview, is ultimately when you do step away from this, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want your legacy to be for what you achieved both in life, but also just in the basketball world?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question because I think we all want to leave a legacy. And I don't think our legacies should be determined by, how many wins we get or how many gold medals we get. I think our legacy is determined by, how we treat people, what kind of character do we get? And so every day, I want to treat people the way I want them to treat me. And I think that's much more of a legacy than how many gold medals were won and so on. So I think how you treat people, your character goes into what kind of legacy you have. I think we all want people to look at us in a spotlight of, hey, he not only was a great coach, but he had these other endearing qualities. He worked hard. He was a great teammate. He was very positive with people. Those kind of things. So I think that has more to do with legacy than the physical things you do on the court.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking time to come on today, Coach, and I can't wait to see what guy got next for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Of course. Always welcome on, Coach. God bless.
God bless.